Longevity Junkie is presented to you by our friends at 8cast.
Hey, Longevity Junkie, it is time to get your fix. This is Buck Joffrey here. My co-host, Nikki Lee, today is actually, she's in Costa Rica, and she's not just on vacation, she's actually taking one for the team. She is out there taking some psychedelics, and we'll get back to that in a minute. But I want to let you know that we're going to start out the first few segments a little bit differently. I've got my producer here, Tim Fornaro, who's going to help get through these segments and have a little bit of a discussion beforehand. Tim, hey, how are you?
I'm good. Good to be on the show I've been recording.
Yeah, I know you've been there the whole time, but now people get to hear the sexy British accent.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah. So, okay, well, this is going to be a fun couple of shows. I think the first one here is an ayahuasca.
Yep.
And the second one's ketamine. So it's basically a two-part series on psychedelics, which, of course, a lot of people might be wondering, why in the world are you talking about psychedelics if you're, the longevity junkie, right?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I do know, just anecdotally, many friends who are experiencing with microdosing of certain substances, perhaps not to be talked about too much on this show, and I'm not endorsing it because they're not all 100% legal.
Yeah.
But as a way to deal with depression or to find new focus in their lives, and again, anecdotally, I think it's been very useful. And then obviously we've talked a lot about hallucinogens and this thing neuroplasticity, which you had to explain to me a few times. But
the way I see this stuff, psychedelics, of course, back in the 60s, they were just, people used them to quote unquote expand their mind. They were drugs used in counterculture. Realizing more and more now is that these are actually tools that we can potentially use as sort of brain hacks, if you will. Now, this show, we talk about longevity in general, and we talk about longevity, but also we talk about quality of life or health span. Depression is a big problem. People who have got mental illness in general is a really big problem. In fact, if you look at depression, this is a incredible fact in which I'm sure we'll come back to. But if you take out the role of suicide, depression, people with untreated depression will live 5 years less than everybody else anyway. In other words, my point is that 5-year reduction in life is not because of suicide. Right. It's because there's also other stuff going on there, like significant inflammation in the body and so on and so forth. So in treating mental disorder, we're not just treating, it's not a champagne problem, right?
Right.
And I think culturally that is becoming more the case. I think back, in the 80s and 90s, or even the early part of this century, I think people kind of looked at it as a champagne problem. Oh, you're fine. Snap out of it, right? And these kinds of psychedelics are. We're recognizing that those problems are real, and that they are just as real as somebody who suffers from, say, diabetes or heart disease. So if that's the case, we need to have better and better treatments. And, the pills don't work for everybody. Therapy doesn't work for everybody right away. Psychedelics are coming up as something that could potentially benefit in a lot of different mental disorders. You mentioned neuroplasticity, and that's an important concept because you'll see that recurring both in ayahuasca and in ketamine. But essentially, the way you think about neuroplasticity is this. Back when I was in medical school, so, that was, 150 years ago, I think. It was like when I was in medical school, we learned, and I started out in neurosurgery too, so it's not like this was peripheral to my learning, but the central nervous system, meaning the brain, the spinal cord, these were nerves and cells and neurons that ultimately, once they're formed, they're not gonna change a lot.
Right.
In other words, it's baked in. You developmentally, you've got these things and you're done. So what we've realized over the last several decades actually now is that that's not true, and that that there is quite a bit of potential for growth in the brain and the spinal cord, and of course peripheral nerves as well, and that we can actually potentially, using psychedelics, promote that. So these drugs appear to have some ability to allow for new connections to form, and that's where it gets really interesting. So, for example, you might say you're trying to treat a trauma, and if you're doing therapy alongside a psychedelic while somebody's on a psychedelic, you might promote the growth of, these really good feelings of peacefulness and so on so forth that you're getting with the actual psychedelic experience, and promote that alongside of the trauma, therefore making it less traumatic. So that idea is to essentially use new pathways to treat problems, and it's been very effective.
It's a fascinating area. It's clearly a growing area. I do think there's a mindset that hallucinogens, it's like woo-woo or like very Malibu and crystal-y, and people are off doing crazy stuff. But there's evidence that supports a lot of this, and some areas, I guess, are more studied than others, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, our first episode here is going to involve ayahuasca, which is certainly something that, you talk about sort of the woo-woo Malibu thing. That's definitely part of it, taking your trip out and to whoever knows where in the Amazon and having your experience. There is data from ayahuasca for sure, and you'll hear about that today. But I think, and then the next episode, ketamine, for example, is extremely well studied and is actually being used in offices in the United States, and that's a very, very promising area, which has some pretty amazing statistics in terms of keeping people from committing suicide, for example, and basically coming in as a rescue drug when everything else fails. So,
right.
So yeah, lots of exciting stuff there. And by the way, there's also use for ketamine, as yours truly has done. And, there's use for ayahuasca as Nikki is doing, that maybe not involve specifically any sort of depression. They may be, in a way, the biohackers version of, trying to get the most out of your brain, right? We do that with our bodies left and right, and this is a way to potentially kind of get the most out of your brain.
Yeah.
So certainly ayahuasca has been shown. There's some research that it has benefits for overcoming trauma, PTSD, and depression. Mm-hmm. But up until now, until recently, it's illegal in the U.S., right? It is. It's not something it's available to everybody. There are some exceptions to that. Apparently, there are some churches that have been given some rights for religious reasons to dispense ayahuasca. I don't know where those churches are, but
yes, I do.
At any rate, in terms of centers, though, there hasn't really been an approved center, like a medical center, until recently. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Nikki is actually on location in the midst of her ayahuasca experience, and she's at the Rythmia Treatment Center, and which is, I'm quoting them here, they are the first and only medically licensed ayahuasca facility in the world. And they are licensed by the Costa Rican Ministry of Health.
Well, yeah, that's something, right? At least, there's some safety stuff going on there, and there's control. And I'm happy to hear that, because Nikki, our own Nikki Lee, is midway through her ayahuasca journey.
Right.
And we're going to speak with her and the director of Rythmia when we come back from these messages. Welcome back to Longevity Junkie, and as you know, we always say on this program that, we're going to talk the talk, but we are also going to walk the walk. We will be guinea pigs for just about anything, and I'll say just about anything. And in this case, we've got some proof of that. It's time for the breakdown with Dr. Jeff Mcnairy of Rythmia and our own Nikki Lee. Hey, Nikki.
Hi.
How are you?
Where are you?
Well, okay. Well, first of all, I'm in Costa Rica at an Ayahuasca retreat center called Rythmia. And I'm like, my cheeks hurt because I just, I'm not even gonna lie. You have no idea. Like, so there's this thing that they try and get you to, and it's called a miracle. And not everyone walks away with it, but their rating right now is at 98%. They're very good about tracking everything. And last night I got mine.
Last night you were on ayahuasca, right? That's yeah. Okay. So we are somewhat under the influence, which is wonderful. I love it. So I know who this person is next to, but let's make sure we introduce him. His name's Dr. Jeff Mcnairy. He's a psychologist. He's a chief medical officer at Rythmia Life Advancement Center in Costa Rica. How you doing?
I'm doing really well, and I'm just already feeling her positive vibe sitting next to me. I can't wait to hear how this went.
I mean, she's always got positive vibes going.
That's for sure.
So it's sort of like magnifying that right now, but it's kind of heartwarming to see her smiling and being so happy.
It's contagious. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to talk ayahuasca here. Okay, so Jeff, I'm going to ask you some questions first, and then Nikki, feel free to jump in whenever. But I guess the first question is, I guess, what's the history behind ayahuasca? I mean, you hear about it a lot these days. It's sort of something a lot of the cool kids are doing. They're going out to places like Costa Rica and having these experiences. But, it's something that's been around for thousands of years, right? So tell us exactly sort of what's the history behind this?
Well, it's an indigenous medicine, they call it, from Latin America, mostly the northern part of South America, the Amazon basin. And, when I was an undergrad in college, I studied medical anthropology, Latin American indigenous ethnobotany. So we talked a lot about ayahuasca and other plant-based medicines from the Amazon region. And I didn't really know a lot about it back then, but what I've come to learn about is, it's this incredible drink that's made from two plants that curanderos and shamans have used for, like you mentioned, thousands of years. And it's used to help people with a variety of ailments, whether that's physical ailments or emotional, spiritual, all these different things. And the reason why I think it's becoming more popular in a Western culture is because I think a lot of the Western sort of modalities for depression and anxiety and trauma work, all that kind of stuff is hitting a lot of dead ends. And sort of the medication regimen that is recommended for those types of conditions is kind of, it's faltered in a lot of ways. And I think people are turning to alternative methods to try to work past things. And there's a lot of great results that we're seeing and that people worldwide are seeing.
Well, let me back up on this a little bit, because I still think the story behind this is pretty crazy. Like, I mean, it's thousands of years old, and basically it's a drink, but it's not like it's like one plant. Like, it's a combination of these different ingredients that each one on its own, it's not really going to do anything to you, but it requires that you have two of these separate plants, and then they're put together and they're kind of cooked together to make this drink, right? I mean, so it's kind of crazy. Like, people come up with that. It's like coming up with bread. I mean, it's the same kind of thing, right? Who would think of making bread, right? But
yes.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
The shamans that we work with from Colombia, and they use the original ayahuasca. It's called yahe. And that medicine, it's like the original blend of these two plants. One of them's a vine. The other is a leaf-based high-content DMT plant. And what they'll tell us, in their lineage and their folklore and their history, their oral tradition, is that the plants talked to the spiritual leaders of the village back, thousands of years ago, and told them to mix these two plants and to have this be a modality they use to heal their tribes. So it's really interesting, because I think what we in the West, what we can understand, right, is that when we learn about indigenous peoples, wherever they might be in the world, one thing that always stands out is that they're always connected very deeply to nature. They're just right in sync with nature. And in the West, we've kind of lost that sort of sync vibe, and we try to control nature. But back then, and even now in the indigenous groups, they're working with nature, and they're a part of nature, and they recognize that. So nature communicates to them. And they say that the plants themselves told them to blend that. It's just
Well, it's interesting because the plants basically were like, hey, one of us is going to give you some DMT and one is going to be a MAO inhibitor. Okay.
Yeah.
And mix this together and cook it. So tell us, so DMT is the active ingredient that's actually giving the effect. Is that right?
Correct. And, the thing about the other component, the monoamine oxidase inhibitor, which is in the vine component, that also plays a big role. The beta carbolines, which are just plant-based active ingredients. There's 3 of them that are really important. Those allow the DMT to get absorbed into the body. So like you said, one of the plants on its own isn't really going to do anything, because if you drink a DMT liquid, nothing really happens because your stomach will digest it. But with the monoamine oxidase component, the inhibitor component in the vine, that allows the DMT to get absorbed. And so all of us have DMT in us already. All living things do. Some things have more content than others, but humans, we have some DMT in us, and it's released naturally in our bodies when we're born, and when we die, and when we have lucid dreams. And when we feel that sort of deja vu, like I've been here before vibe, there tends to be DMT floating around in the bloodstream at a high level when we're having those experiences. So it's this very interesting molecule, and there's a lot of theories about what it's for and why we have it. But when you drink a little extra DMT from these plants, then all those senses are heightened, and you can really work on a lot of important things for your progression.
Just as an aside, could you theoretically do it IV and forget about the MAO inhibitor then?
Yeah, you could. And it's just very, very strong. And the critique of the IV use is that it's very fast, it's very strong, and it's hard to download and kind of integrate the information that might come from that experience. While a lot of people have done that and report having amazing things happen, it's not as insightful is kind of the critique.
Okay, well, so this is a question for Nikki, because I want to know like what it feels like. What does it feel like? Can you compare it to anything else?
Okay. Well, I'm trying here.
Okay.
So I was here 4 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so officially now I've technically been in 6 ceremonies. So I've taken the drink 6 times, multiple times a night. And one thing that is for certain is that no night is the same. No experience is the same, because as you go through something, you unlock, you just keep unlocking and clearing out and getting deeper to the root.
Do you feel like are you like in a dream sensation, or like what's the sensation you're feeling?
Okay. Well, and like I said, it's different every time.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's an overwhelming sense of different emotions that you're trying to navigate through. For me personally, they call it drunk, actually, which is really interesting. So there's a drunk feeling to it. But then there's such clarity too. And it's really undescribable, but there's different layers of it as well. There's like pintas, which is visions. Like, in my opinion, I get pintas every single time. For me, it's very colorful. It's very geometric, sacred geometry, in my opinion. I feel like I see quantum physics. Honestly, if you look up quantum physics and you see like the grid everywhere, I see the grid absolutely everywhere, where there's like portals, where there's, it's like a beautiful design. It's really insane. Like if you see mandalas and things like that, like I'm surrounded by mandalas, and colors and all these things. And, there's also another form of it, which is called the body, and, chime in if I ever.
Oh, you're right on the point there. Exactly.
It's body. So like, you'll feel it. Like, some people are like, well, nothing's happening because I'm not visualizing anything. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that, because they have an expectation. When you just have to trust the medicine and the body, like, even if you feel like gurgling in your stomach, because you take the drink and then you go back down, to a mattress and you lay down and you be in stillness and you allow Mother Aya to just like work through the system and, kind of gather up your prescription, because no prescription is the same. And it just, it serves you what you need. You can go in with an intention and mama will be like, okay, I'll note that, but you got to work on this first.
Is Mama the pet name for ayahuasca?
Mama Aya, well, she's
Mama
Mother
Aya.
Earth.
That comes from the shaman tradition of the vine being representative of Mother Nature.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you look at Jeff, so when you're, is there often a common denominator, with the way people feel on these things? I guess part of that question, it relates to like what parts of the brain are being affected.
Yeah. Well, when there's the pinta, like Nikki's having like these experiences with all these colors and patterns, what's happening is in the default mode network of the brain, which is kind of our resting mindfulness state, there's different sort of concepts in my consciousness and all of our consciousness of order and disorder. And when those two worlds are colliding, because we're understanding certain contexts that are happening and we're mindful of like why we're at Rythmia, what our intentions are, we have goals, that's all orderly and kind of makes sense. But then there's this other part that starts to surface that's sort of like outside the body or really within the body, but just very deep. And it seems sort of chaotic and disorderly. Not that that's bad, but just it's something that's hard to understand. When those two worlds start to collide, that's when those colors start to manifest and show up. And what it represents, and a lot of the research that's been done, say that when those colors show up and those patterns, that the brain is very moldable. And as you know, we call it synaptic plasticity. There's a moment, there's an opportunity, like a window to be mindful about the intentions that you're working on. And so there's been studies that show that LSD, ketamine, DMT, which is ayahuasca, and psilocybin mushrooms all create that sort of plastic part of the neurochemistry that's allowing a shift to occur in the brain. So that's a little bit what's happening when you have a pinta, as Nikki explained.
So you've got lots of different conditions you're treating, right? People have reported benefits for depression, anxiety, trauma, PTSD, substance abuse. What do you find in your experience? What has it been like sort of the most effective for?
I believe it's the most effective for trauma. Absolutely. And a big part of why is because the DMT turns on the sigma-1 receptor, which is located in the cell membrane of our neurons. And it turns it on and allows an epigenetic process to occur where we can access our memories. We can access parts of the amygdala where we've stored up and kind of pushed in there emotions that we didn't want to feel or suppressed. Yeah. Like the emotions of a traumatic moment. Because if I'm in a traumatic moment, I don't want to feel those emotions because I need to survive. So if I'm feeling scared, I might freeze and I might not be effective in my survival. So my fear and my anger and my confusion will get pushed into the amygdala and suppressed there, and I can behaviorally survive. So then later in life, those emotions are unlocked and they come forward through this process, which ayahuasca helps with. So it's really interesting how it's happening neurochemically as well as intentionally.
And you asked how, like, what I feel. And because of that explanation, I'm now able to actually answer that question. Last time I was here, my big takeaway was the shaman told me you have to feel it to heal it. So what you feel is actually everything you need to heal. So that's why people are like, oh my God, it's so crazy, because all that suppression, all that trauma that you're burying inside there, you don't allow yourself to feel it. And even if you like let out a cry here and there, or like a movie triggers you and you're like, relating to it. And that's where that's why movies connect so much with people, because they allow them to see themselves in whatever's happening in that scene. And this allows you to, this place allows you to have such a safe environment to feel something so traumatic and feel so supported. And you don't feel that in life. You don't, even if you go to your mom and dad and like, those are supposed to be your safe havens, like that's not really the case for everybody. And they all have their own opinions and, judgments, whether they mean to or not. It doesn't allow you to really fully express, because also they might take it on as a personal thing where like, oh my God, I caused my kid this much trauma. What the, you know what I mean? And it's like, it's devastating, right? And you don't want to let your parents know that like, I've been going through this, you know, and they're like, shoot, where was I? You know, it's like, I'm sorry. Like they, you know, it's hard. So this place, and I have chills because of last night. This place like allows you such a safe space to really go to the depths of even hell sometimes, you know, like really, yeah, I think.
Oh, boy, that's so
like,
good.
No, but it's beautiful. Honestly, to feel it, you have to lean into feeling things. Like we strive for that without knowing that we're striving for that so much by signing up for therapy, learning about different things, trying to have deep conversations with people, trying to connect with people. And it's like we still just kind of scrape the surface, but we're not able to really like deep dive into the depths of the ocean, right? And like, for example, like last night, it's not even relived, but I got to finally move through and feel and express all my childhood trauma, which I'm sure there's more, but that's all I could handle last night. My childhood trauma of being bullied so much, never feeling like I had friends. And the only people who actually were acting like my friends would always prank me or hit me or throw things at me, or like I never had a safe haven of friends. I was always abandoned by them. Or like my parents, like they have such great, beautiful intentions, and I have such deep compassion for them. But like my dad had a horrible childhood. Sorry, Dad, but you had a horrible childhood, and like he's not able to provide the safe space because he doesn't feel safe in himself. So he can't provide the safety for me to feel that. And my mom, oh, bless her heart. She's sensitive. She's so heart driven. She's hurting too. Like she's had so much trauma in her life. And I hope you don't mind me saying this out loud, Mom, but like her father took his life, you know, and it's earth shattering. So she also doesn't have like the foundation and the capacity to like hold everything that I'm also feeling. Like a short answer is whatever you're going through that you have suppressed or you need to actually feel, that's what you're going to feel on ayahuasca. And every single time, last night I was like, I don't know how I'm going to face everybody after. I was like crying. I was puking. I was shitting. I was doing all these things. Okay. Really at the same time. It was insane. Like my body was on overload, and I'm just going to be crass because that's just me. I don't care. I brought diapers for Christ's sake. Like for the last time, I was like, oh my God. So like, and I'm being so vulnerable right now, but it's okay. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to face anybody. Yeah. I was like, I just want to go back to my room. I want to cuddle in a shower, and I just want to like fetal position. And yeah, it was horrible. But then at the end of it, oh my God, I was dancing with the moon. I literally plugged into the earth. I mean, every night here so far, which is only 2, tonight's 3rd, and then we go to the 4th. I have been needing to reconnect with Mother Nature, and I have literally been plugging into the earth. Like I will go outside after I've gone through some stuff, and someone will always come up and be like, do you want to go outside? And I'm like, yes, because I need to connect with the earth. Like I need to be out there, like under like our moon and like La Luna, and like just connect. And I sat down, and I've done this both nights. I've sat down on the earth, and I'm like grounding myself. I'm like literally like planting like roots into the earth. And then I'll start to lay down, and I will just, right here is my third eye, and I will literally just face plant into the earth and plug in and just like feel at peace and at calm. And it's like, it's insane what you go through. But at the end, I've been this way my whole life. And everyone knows from like Positivity Time that I did on Instagram and all that gratitude is like my heartbeat. Gratitude. I'm so thankful. And you always come out grateful. And it's so beautiful. So everything that you go through, all the things you think you can't come back from, all the like the trauma, the depths, like you always get so grateful, and your heart is bursted wide open.
Amazing. Beautiful.
You have Nikki a little break there to but in terms of neuroplasticity, talk a little bit of what neuroplasticity is. And there's sort of, there's the acute effect of this, which is obviously in part what, Nikki's currently feeling even right now, which is sort of the benefit, the psychedelic element of this. But the neuroplasticity element of this is, it's triggered. It's not something you're necessarily maybe you could explain what neuroplasticity is and how that factors all into this.
Yeah. So like in our developmental years under the age of 12, and then after that, we've developed a lot of bad habits and ways of thinking that are limiting. And we've had our trauma moments where we've become scared about certain things. And we've lived in a rut on a lot of different environments. And so our brain is a series of these neurochemical connections and neuron pathways that are used very frequently and almost in a rumination sort of loop that happens. And so all of us have like this kind of chaotic bundle of like ways of dealing with our world, and it's based on our own experiences and our own ego and what keeps me safe, or it's my personality. But a lot of that's great, but a lot of it is not. And so what psychedelics do and what ayahuasca is really good at doing is it lifts up all of those neuron connections that are not serving us. And then they get reset and calibrated and balanced in a way that's intentional. And the intention setting is a huge part of this, because if I just drank ayahuasca and just laid there and, something would probably happen, but not as much as if I have a goal or an intention. And one of the epigenetic concepts talk about mindful intention setting when you're trying to heal something. So the neuron plasticity is that I'd rather, instead of seeing a dog and being afraid all the time because I got bit when I was 5, I'd rather see a dog and think it's really nice and I want to go pet that dog like everybody else does. But because of my trauma, I don't do that. So that's a goal. And then I lift up that old pathway, I recalibrate the neurochemistry surrounding it, and I reset a new one. And I start to think and use that new neuron pathway, which is dogs are nice, dogs are cute, I like dogs. And that's kind of an analogy about what's happening with the neurochemistry in general for our lives.
Yeah, with neuroplasticity in general, I mean, just to make a comment on that, like, once upon a time I was a neurosurgery resident, and we didn't used to think that nerves really changed much. They didn't really grow. That you have what you have, and that was about it.
I remember those days.
Yeah. And
those
so
inside to read, yeah.
Right, exactly. And what we've learned since then is that they do, even in older individuals, they do grow. You get new pathways and connections and that sort of thing. So when you talk about neuroplasticity, plastic meaning change, right? So changing the neural connections, that's something that that ayahuasca, in addition to a lot of these other psychedelics like ketamine, for example, is known to do, and basically allow for new connections to form, which is sort of this new openness to the world and that kind of thing. I mean, I know you're sort of your specialist in ayahuasca. Do you have a sense for how ayahuasca is different in the neuroplastic element from some of these other psychedelics?
Yeah, I mean, they all have in common that they create this plasticity sort of neuron response. But ketamine is a very interesting one because it's synthetic and it's very effective, and it can be used with people that are maybe contraindicated based on their medical conditions for ayahuasca, because the monoamine oxidase inhibitor component of ayahuasca limits a lot of people. A lot of things. And some people just can't, it's not healthy for them because of heart conditions or meds. They might be on SSRI medication or other things. And maybe they can get off those meds and later try it. But for an immediate help, ketamine is really, really good when it's done through an IV infusion that's medically supervised, because the ketamine, it doesn't have an MAOI, so it allows people to be on meds still, and it allows people to have, like, it's a milder version of ayahuasca. That's the best way to kind of explain it. And the receptors on the cell body in a person, as far as neurology is concerned, the NMDA receptors are blocked by ketamine, which means that the serotonin will kind of hang around a little bit longer, and it kind of acts like an antidepressant med, like it kind of should, like meds are supposed to be working, and some do and some don't, and a lot of it's theory, right? But, and they've disproven some of that anyway, but it has a lot to do with like your levels of dopamine and serotonin and all those neurochemicals, those feel good neurons or neurochemicals that we like to feel and like to have help us. Ketamine is similar in that way, that it helps create this new pathway. And the key to ketamine is that there's a therapist usually in the room, and you're talking with the therapist and you have goals of therapy, just like you would, like when I was a therapist back in LA, we're talking. And so there's a lot of that can happen that helps kind of spark this new pathway. So ketamine is actually a really good option for people that can't drink ayahuasca.
There is some interesting stories like around ayahuasca, and I saw this one reference. I didn't find the actual study necessarily, but the references to the study several times. And while I was reading about these Brazilian violent criminals, and do you know that study?
I do.
Talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and they were giving them ayahuasca in the jail. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah. I think it was like, they basically did half of them. They gave them ayahuasca, and half of them they didn't.
Yeah.
And what they found was those who actually got the ayahuasca, there was a far less recidivism. In other words, they didn't come back. A lot more of them didn't come back to jail after getting ayahuasca because it seemed to trigger some kind of, some sort of some change in their brain chemistry that made them less. These were violent criminals.
Yes.
So
those ones, those guys had, of course, antisocial personality disorder, the majority. And what I've learned and studied with the research and all the things we're looking at here is that ayahuasca works amazing for personality disorders. And one thing that personality disorders all kind of have in common, there's 10 of them, and they all have what's called an ego-syntonic position that the person maintains, which means my worldview is just the way it is for everybody. And that's obviously not accurate. We all know that, Nikki's perspective on life is going to be different than mine because we grew up differently, and that's cool. And that's not weird to me. But somebody that has antisocial personality disorder and borderline and narcissistic and all these personality disorders, they view that what they're seeing and feeling is like the reality. And so an antisocial person is emotionally struggling because they can't hold or contain their own emotions. So they're projecting them outward. And that's where that violent sort of projection occurs that allows them to kind of wrap their head around doing a violent crime. Whereas most of us can't understand how anybody can ever do something like that, but they're projecting out this emotion. And so what happens is when they drink ayahuasca, they become in an ego dystonic position, which is a healthier, more, let's say normal or good way to be, which means that that's an individual. And I don't want to hurt that person because I'm not, they're not a bad person. I'm feeling negative, but that's not their issue. And they kind of have this self-awareness thing happen where they can realize that, they can have more empathy. And that's, in my opinion, what's happening with those studies in the prisons. And that's why people that have borderline personality disorder, in therapy with DBT, dialectic behavioral therapy, and it's a very good therapy that's done on people that have that, they come here and knock it out of the park within a week because they can create that position of viewing themselves, their uniqueness, but also others' uniqueness, and that builds empathy. And that's what the shift is. So it's actually really incredible because they tell people with personality disorders, you can't cure it. It's who you are. And I never really believed that when I was in school. I didn't have anything to back it up, but now I do. It's really cool.
I need to change my personality. Let's see. Let's talk about the actual, so the Rythmia Center, the protocol. Okay. Yeah. So maybe Nikki, you went there. Tell us what happened. You went there and what?
Well, even before you got here, you had to do stuff, right?
Yeah. Okay. Exactly. I'm like, there's a whole protocol that you even have to do beforehand. This is a medical center. So, and he was saying about how, on ketamine, you can be on different, medications, and here you can't. So there's a whole protocol you go through about like, what medications are you on? And there's a specific diet so that you can clean out your system. And do they not do alcohol? I just haven't drank in almost 2 years.
Someone has an alcohol. Exactly. Yeah, like ideally 2 weeks, no alcohol before, but sometimes people will have a drink here and there and they're not addicted and we say 3 days before is okay. Yeah.
There's like a lot of things like moldy cheese and things like that you have to avoid, right? Because of the bowel inhibitor.
High contents of salt, things like that.
Yeah. So you got to be on a diet for a couple weeks.
You have to prep your body.
Gotta get your diapers. Gotta get your diapers.
Your fucking Depends on, man.
We sell them in gift shop.
Do you?
Yeah.
Because you didn't last time.
Yeah, we do now.
Oh, I was like, you guys need to get that on your protocol.
Yeah, in gift shop.
Okay.
Good. That's awesome.
Shop. It's a gift that keeps on giving. Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, so the preparation goes all the way to like your diet and like your habits of living before, because you have to prep your vessel, right? You know, you fly here, they pick you up. It's wonderful. They pick you up from the airport. You don't have to worry about any of that. And then once you're here,
what does it look like?
Oh, it's beautiful. It's like a tropical resort, honestly. It's a really beautiful, safe space. You feel like you're on a vacation.
Probably no swimming pools around, right? In case
there's a swimming pool. There's a swimming pool. There's a spa, and they provide you with a free massage, and their massages are amazing. I always end up getting more than one. They have a little like cold plunge and a steam sauna and a mud bath. Their mud is incredible.
Volcanic.
Yeah. And, so it's a like rest, relaxation, intensity for 4 nights.
Good way to start.
Yeah. But also one of the things I feel like that sets Rythmia apart is that, they have these like classes that, you know, you don't have to do anything, but it's very highly recommended, and it really does help you unlock. And some people get these aha moments in class that they don't get at ceremony, and because of the wonderfully explained like processes and how to adapt to all this and understand it in your own right. And the teachers here are wonderful. Again, such a safe space and so knowledgeable and science medically backed. That's what also is so beautiful about this place. Like you can come in like a science nerd or being like, I only trust science, none of this like spiritual stuff. And like you're going to get a lot out of it because there's so much explanation and it can click for those people. And so you have, you know, intention settings, you have meditations, you have breath work, you have yoga every morning if you can get up.
Yeah, hydrocolonic cleanses.
Birds, butterflies, just trees. It's so
nice.
We're a macaw refuge.
Yeah, the macaws. Yeah.
So there's a lot of those bright parrot, red and blue-green parrots flying around here. Mm-hmm. Super cool.
Yeah. And you're right next to a beach, and they have beach times. The shuttle takes you to the beach a couple of days, or parts of time of 2 days. And, I mean, it's really beautiful. They even have a helipad for people who are like too bougie and want to fly in.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Does the ceremony, is it like day 2, like the day after you get there, you do the ceremony?
It's always Monday night.
Yeah, Monday night. And you can either get in Saturday or Sunday. Yeah. Most people
do. And
what
does the ceremony look like? Describe the ceremony.
Well, it's in a place called the Maloka, which is a building in the center of the property that is all windows. Like there's windows 360, and so you can also kind of have that sense of nature. They open up the windows, and you can just kind of really connect and get the airflow, and it's really beautiful. And there's, it's very, very, very clean. And there's there are white mattresses. You go in with a mattress and a white bucket and, a toilet paper roll and a pillow. And
you're going in prepared. Yeah, you're going in prepared. You know?
Keep it civilized, people.
There's a lot of bathrooms.
There's a lot of, there's a lot of bathrooms
all around.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, man. Oh,
and,
God. Yeah.
And then, you know, and all around is, a bunch of different chairs for the people who hold space and are there to like help you.
So you're doing it with other people.
Yes, you're doing it with other people. I've been super blessed to like this group is 36.
Yeah.
And the one I did in January was like 39.
Oh, yeah.
Like I've had small groups.
Yeah, that's small for us.
It is pretty small for them because they can get up to
100.
Oh, shoot. 100.
We maxed out at 100.
Yeah. 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 And I know it sounds like a lot of people, and it is, but it's really interesting how they always have the right amount of people around the Maloka to like help you out. So it's, even though there's a lot, you're still going to get some really beautiful attention if you need it.
Yeah. Lines at the bathroom weren't too much at 39. So, and there's shamans too, right?
Yes.
What do the shamans do? And what makes you a shaman?
You want me to answer that one?
Yeah.
Okay. So, first of all, I never thought I would be managing shamans in my career. Used to manage doctors, nurses, and therapists, but now I manage shamans. So it's very interesting. So, a shaman, I've really only met a couple shamans in my lifetime. They're usually from a lineage. Like we have this guy, Taira Juanito Chindoy. He's our head shaman. And, he trains a bunch of our whole staff, but there's about 60 of these other people involved in the plant medicine sessions, in the ayahuasca session. And they are varying degrees of training involved. So there's the ones that can serve medicine, and those are the ayahuasca providers. And then there's the assistants, and then there's the helpers. And so there's all these people that train with our head shaman, and they often go to Colombia to his indigenous village and train. And they had a calling in their life to be able to, to do this. It's kind of like, I guess I had a calling to be a psychologist in some way, right? So it's kind of like that for them. Like they really connected with ayahuasca themselves. And they have to go through years of training before they can actually serve ayahuasca. So we only have about 6 people here that work here, maybe 7, it depends. They can actually serve the ayahuasca. And the rest of the staff in the shaman department are doing healings. And there's these traditional cultural practices that they've learned and that some of them grew up with, that are clearing energy and clearing the space for each guest to feel back grounded in themselves. Or they're removing negative, dark energy from people with these plants and these like bushes and things. And they call it, like all the Waira is something that they use as well. And it's just it's very cultural, and very interesting to watch and be a part of. And when I was an anthropology undergrad, we had a concept called participant observer. So I'm actually observing what's going on around me, but I'm involved in it. And it's this really cool perspective that, like, my culture is not indigenous. I don't come from the jungle, at least not recently. And so, but I'm a part of this whole thing because I'm participating in it. And it's been accepting of me, and it's accepting of these guests, and everybody who comes here become a part of it. So it's really, really culturally rich.
And then, and then you get the ayahuasca stuff itself. Where do you get that from? How do you know it's like, pure ayahuasca? I mean, is it sourced from somewhere? Like, how's that?
So our head shaman, Taira Juanito, he's the guy that makes it, and he blesses it in his village, and all the elders are in charge of it all. And it's a process that we have. And it's the Ikaros are the songs and the prayers and the chants that they'll do in the session with the guests that ask permission of the medicine itself. Can we serve this to these people? And the answer is always yes, which is cool.
Yeah.
I've never had a no before. I'm sure it's happened, but I'm sure that, but, and so the shamans, there's a sustainable agriculture region of the Amazon basin where they're sourcing the ayahuasca, and it's been in their lineage for thousands of years, this one little valley. And so, we contribute to the sustainability of that by funding certain things and safeguarding it, and permission from the Colombian government and the indigenous societies and all these different sort of regulations around that.
And then before people drink it, they set intentions. So, right? Is that right? So you want to talk about those intentions?
Yeah. And those are the ones that Nikki had, and that she broke through, it sounds like last night with, right? So I really like these intentions. We have 3. And if you achieve these, that means you got your miracle, is what we say, right? So the first one is show me who I've become. And that's really important because I want to see what I'm showing the world that's not authentically me. And the reason why I started doing that was I was probably 5 years old, and I learned that if I'm just myself, I get ignored, or if I'm just myself, I get hurt or abused or teased or whatever. And I learned that, okay, I gotta adjust who I am and show the world something else, because this fake persona I'm creating is helping me survive a little bit easier. And then when we do that as children, that just snowballs into our adult years. And now I'm really dissociated from my true self. So that first intention is really important. Show me who I've become. I want to know what is not authentically me. And the second one is merge back with my soul at all costs. So that's shifting from a dissociative state back to myself and grounding. So most people are hypervigilant in their life. That's because of trauma. They're very aware of everything around them at all times. And that prevents a self-connection, because if I'm always in this emergency mode of hypervigilance, I never have time to sit with me and heal and feel and know what I need to do and be for myself. So this intention helps connect and plug in the person, and they can ground in themselves and be no longer dissociated. And the third one is healing the heart. And that one is the final one and the most beautiful one, where you get all the love and you let go of all the pain and the sadness and the discontent and all the illness or whatever it is that someone's dealing with. And it's all gone, and you're just filling yourself up with love, and you're healing your true self. And that's beautiful, because the wounding that occurred when we were very young, whatever that wounding looked like, was very scary and hurtful, and it's been unresolved. And so now when you resolve that and you do that inner child work, something I was taught, and one good thing I was taught in psychology school is inner child work. So you get to do that very deeply in this process. And then that final intention really hits home. And that's how we teach all those intentions to the guests day one. And if they stick to that, everything else they came here to get, they achieve. So it's very nice. It's a really straightforward way to handle it.
I understand that having more people to share this experience with is actually better. Why is that?
Well, we collect data on the guest experience. And so what we found is that the larger the group, the higher the success rate for getting their miracle at the end, because they self-report at the end in an exit survey. And we've been tracking them all week, like what classes they're attending or not, how much ayahuasca they're drinking in the night or not, or how much little, whatever. And so what we found is that when there's a very small group, the success rate's a little lower. And we think that's because of the energy of the group is strong when there's a lot of people here, and the momentum is high.
You have a lot of support, like from the board and stuff from them as well. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, our board of directors is incredible. We have Kelly Slater, professional surfer, most world champs ever, just retired. He's amazing. Jack Canfield, the author of Chicken Soup of the Soul. Tony Coe, she's an amazing businesswoman, a cosmetic mogul, Fortune 400 women CEO, entrepreneurs, amazing. Reverend Michael Beckwith from the Agape spiritual community. Martin Luther King III, he's awesome. He always comes and has a great experience and loves what we're doing. And we have, who am I forgetting? We have Earl Koski, who is an entrepreneur, very successful business guy. Brandy Sabella, who, she was one of our original founders of the company, and she's a spiritual entrepreneur. And then we have, Cesar Millan, the dog whisperer. Ron White, the comedian. He's great. He got rid of his alcohol addiction here. That was, that he put the final nail in the coffin with his alcohol. It's over. And then our most recent addition is, Frank Biden. So Joe Biden's brother, he's on our board. So let me think, did I forget anybody? Jerry Powell, our CEO, is on our board as well. He was one of my patients back in Los Angeles almost 20 years ago. So he's the CEO. So
if people are interested, how do they find out more about Rythmia and coming out there?
We have a lot of ways. You can go to Facebook. You can go to the internet in general, just type in Rythmia. We do a Google search. We have a presence on Instagram, and those are the best ways. And there's an easy way to just fill out a form, and there's an 800 number to book your stay at us. It's very easy. We're all over the internet.
Are you coming back, Nikki?
So am I coming back to here, or am I coming back home? Because that's a different question.
You can stay here. You're welcome to stay here.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel like, I go out and I do. I'm all about action. I'm all about walking the walk, talking the talk. Like, I don't want to talk about it unless I'm going to be about it. I'm like very integral with that. And so I didn't know really why I was called here. And I mean, now I'm definitely unpacking why, but I just kept going with the flow and like where the energy would lead me and the opportunities that presented themselves. And anytime I hear of something that, triggers me in a positive way or with curiosity, like I want to try it out for myself. And I I want to keep diving into myself and being that authentic version of myself, and like I found so much love for myself last night. I claimed my sovereignty. I am that I am, and I'm proud of it. And that's so hard for me to claim. That was so hard for me to claim. And I would love to come back. And
you are more than welcome at any time. At any time.
Yeah. So of course you should come with me, Buck.
Yeah.
I'm a little scared.
It's beautiful. I promise.
Well, I'm going to let you guys get back to your fun and discovery and all that. But thanks for giving us all this time, Jeff and Nikki, having so much discovery there, and taking a little bit of time to report back to us. So,
of course, live on the scene.
That's right. Reporting. That's right. Not a dull moment here.
No.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with our healthy takeout. Welcome back to Longevity Junkie. Time for healthy takeout.
Well, that was quite an interview. What do you think? What are your thoughts and impressions here?
Firstly, I'm just kind of like really impressed with Nikki.
Yeah.
Because, that was kind of a big thing. She's midway through this experience on her own journey, right?
Yeah.
And she sat there for an hour and did this interview. And that was impressive.
Well, and it was pretty clear that she was still under the influence.
Right. Yes.
I mean, she wasn't deep in, she wasn't deep in shaman land, right? But she was definitely still in some sort of twilight, and really
very full of love.
Yeah.
Very full of love.
She was sort of adorable.
Yeah. But like, I mean, I can't say I'm not curious like that. I think maybe we should all go down there and try it out.
Yeah.
I know you never go anywhere without your producer, but
I'm very interested. I'll tell you, for me, the diaper thing and all the GI stuff really, I mean, it makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's for some people, that's not a big deal.
But I think you just have to embrace that part of it. But I know that, we'll talk, this is a 2-part episode, obviously. And the next episode, we're going to talk about your own experience in ketamine, which is similarly, transformative, I think, but maybe without the puke.
It might be sort of a lighter version,
right?
Experience wise, right?
I wonder. It'd be very. I mean, like if you tried ayahuasca, which you prefer, and vice versa. If you tried ketamine, and what the differences are, aside from the lack of projectile vomits. But I don't want to get bogged down with that because it was clearly was, transformative. Like, talk about it with her when she gets back next week.
Yeah, I think the thing to remember, and I think in the big picture, and this is going to relate to ayahuasca, it's going to relate to ketamine, and this relates also to, people doing microdosing with LSD or psilocybin, which mushrooms, which I'm sure we'll hit at some point. But what they are effectively targeting is this idea that our brains are fluid, right? In other words, they're not fixed. They're living organs that can change, right? And that is an incredibly different perspective on the brain that we have now than we had 15, 20 years ago. So I think that's one of the big ones. And it's exciting too, because it's not just psychedelics that can do some of these changes. I mean, there are certainly other interventions that we know may have some benefit. We'll talk at some point, I'm sure, about hyperbaric oxygen, for example. Hyperbaric oxygen seems to have some huge create some huge changes in brain, especially for people who have had substance abuse problems or brain trauma. There's some potential treatments even for Alzheimer's disease that are involving exposing people to various types of sound waves. So the point is, the brain is an organ that can be manipulated,
right?
And that's we're
not predetermined.
We're
right?
not predetermined. And for example, I guess the good news on that for people is that if you are suffering from various types of Well, I mean, obviously, if we're talking about mental illness, depression, PTSD, all those, we've already talked about how you can change that. But even if you're somebody who's got issues with brain fog or memory issues or things like that, these are things that there are actually tools out there that you can try that are not particularly risky, that can potentially really create some really good benefits.
Right. Okay. Just for our listeners, like, is this prohibitively expensive? I mean, I think Nikki's ayahuasca experience was not cheap. Sort of almost like a vacation kind of cost, if you imagine it. Like, it almost looks like a resort there as well. But like, what about is ketamine? Is that an expensive process?
Ketamine, I think, is more and more available in centers. You can go do sort of higher dose ketamine in those centers. I would say that my suggestion ideally would be to do it in an office with a psychiatrist rather than it just being a purely like you go there and they knock you out and come back in 2 hours type situation. Although, I don't have any data to support that one's necessarily better than the other. Microdosing psilocybin, I don't actually think it's technically legal as of yet in California, but I think it's going to be. Though that's very popular, it's another area that I think is definitely worth jumping into. Psilocybin, which is mushrooms. Again, not super expensive, that kind of thing. And in that case, not to get off a tangent too much, but the benefits of the microdosing stuff, part of the benefit there is it's small, so that means it's going to be less expensive.
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, that was part one of our special on hallucinogens. Next time, Nikki will be back, and we're going to dive into the world of ketamine as a treatment for depression.
Longevity Junkie is created by Dr. Buck Joffrey, MD, and Timothy Fornara. It is executive produced by me, Nikki Lee, Buck Joffrey, and Timothy Fornara. The show is produced by Pretty Fast. Original music by Alloy Tracks with mixing by Jay Palezzi, and we're distributed by our friends at Acast. See you next time.